I talk about insulin resistance a lot because it's the one thing that's linking to most of our disease and disorder today. And I think it's important for people to understand what's happening. So, this channel, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nutritionist, I'm just a real world woman who got really sick, got a lot better, started learning about insulin resistance, and started understanding what had happened to my health and what's likely happening to most of you. Normally, I break it down and we talk about one of the symptoms above or the issues above, and um, we go over how that's related to insulin resistance. But today, I just kind of want to go over metabolism and food and metabolism right now. So I'm sorry, I'm a little distracted. I have a little beautiful 7-year-old boy who's on spring break and he stayed the night with me. So um, this live will probably be short because I'm going to go spend time with him. But let's dive in. There's a lot to cover, and my talks are pretty simple. I'm not the science guy who's get into all the little components of it. I just want to give you an idea of what's happening. And I love when you ask questions and let me know that this is valuable to you, or you need more information or whatever. So I normally have a tea every morning. You guys, I need to wake up and have my tea. So I'm going to mix that while we're talking. Now, with metabolism, we're going to talk about insulin resistance, but there's really three major causes of insulin resistance. I normally focus on the dietary causes, right? So let's talk about all three of the causes though. Stress. Stress is a huge cause of insulin resistance. So even if you're having a low sugar diet, but you're under a lot of stress, you're setting your body up to become insulin resistant anyway. And so then it becomes even more important to watch the nutrients that are coming into the body. So a high stress life, whether it's from work and the demands at work, whether it's just the demands of family and getting the kids to soccer and their band practices and all the stuff that they got going on, or maybe it's just an abusive partner or relationship that you have. But stress, or not having enough money to be able to pay the bills, all of that stress increases epinephrine and cortisol. And it's very well known that cortisol and epinephrine can increase insulin, and then that long-term stress then, even in the absence of high amounts of carbs, can make you insulin resistant. We're going to talk about what insulin resistance does in the body in just a minute, but I think it's really important to understand these other two factors that I talk about, but I think they play in, right? So stress is one. Inflammation is the other. And I've talked about this a lot. So I have had multiple surgeries from injuries and whatnot throughout my body. I've had multiple injuries. I've had over 20 broken bones, lots of trauma in the body. Well, when inflammation goes up and all of those things cause inflammation, insulin also goes up. So again, even in the absence of having high carbohydrates, if you're having this constant physical trauma or inflammation in the body, maybe it's because of the other foods that you're eating, or maybe it's just because of those stresses and accidents and whatnot, your insulin levels go up and you become more insulin resistant. So stress and inflammation are two huge causes of insulin resistance. Now, most of us, like every surgery that I had was necessary. Every injury that I had was unforeseen. So could I control those factors in making my body insulin resistant? Probably not, right? Um, like I fell and tore my thumb off and had to have it sewn back on. Who would have known, right? That caused inflammation, reintroduced insulin into my system, and probably helped with the heavy state of insulin resistance I was in. But the third part, now the one that I talk about the most, because it's the one that we can control the most, is our food. So our food drives insulin resistance because what we're eating now is so full of sugar that it's rising our blood sugar levels. And when we have high blood sugar levels, we have high insulin levels. So let me take a pause because I just kind of dove headlong in. Good morning, everybody. Welcome in. If you get value from this, please let me know. If you need more information, please let me know. Because this really is meant to be a conversation. Okay. And it feels sometimes, some days it's like we're having a great conversation, and some days it's like y'all are a little bit sleepy and you are not conversating with me. So know that I love when you talk. And thank you, Cassie. So let's dive into the nutrition part of what's causing insulin resistance. Now, two things you can do is try to manage your stress. Maybe you get more sleep. Maybe you do some meditation. Maybe you just get those levels down. But what if insulin resistance is causing some of that stress too? It's bidirectional with the first two things. Insulin resistance can cause inflammation to go up. Inflammation can cause insulin to go up. Insulin can cause stress, right, rising your cortisol and epinephrine, but rising your cortisol and epinephrine can cause insulin to go up. So those two things, very bidirectional and a little bit harder for most of us to manage, right? Now, the third one, the food, it seems hard for us to manage, but it's really not, and we're going to break it down right now, okay? So when we look at food, what we need to understand is this thing called macronutrients and micronutrients. When the macronutrients are the big things in our food, right? The big nutrients in our food. And the micronutrients are the little things like vitamins and minerals, and they're not so little, but that's how we're going to break it down. So in the macronutrients, we have fiber, we have protein, we have fats, and we have carbohydrates. Fiber is a non-digestible carbohydrate. So when we look at them, let's start with carbohydrates. When we eat carbohydrates, what's happening is we're giving our body fuel. It's not, the carbohydrates and any of the food is not supposed to be about satisfying our taste buds so much as it is about getting energy to our body. Part of what's happened is that we're so driven to satisfy our taste buds, and we've forgotten about the nutrients we're supposed to get in, that we're getting sick. We'll deal with that in a minute. But carbohydrates deliver energy to the body, and they deliver a lot of energy, and it's easily digestible, and it gets that energy pretty quick to the cells of your body through the pathway of insulin delivering it. When you're in a fed state, insulin is what's delivering that food you're eating. Now, protein, it can break down into some energy, but its primary job is a building block, helping cells grow, like your muscle cells. It's a building block. That's its primary source. And that's a great thing for us to have, right? So carbohydrates will spike your insulin really high. Proteins spike your insulin only minimally because there is some caloric value, some energy value in protein. It's not just a building block. So it spikes your insulin a little less high, about half as much. When we look at fats, and we're going to talk about what fats in just a minute, when we look at fats, they only negligibly inflate your insulin. So we really talk about it as not increasing your insulin, because the amount it does increase insulin is so minimal that it's really not worth considering. But fats will give you energy, but not increase your insulin. That's kind of crazy, right? So we always think of carbohydrates, vegetables, and whatnot for our energy, but we forget that fats actually give us energy. We're going to talk about fats a little bit in just a minute, because there's a lot of misconceptions about fats, what type of fats and what they're doing for us and our insulin resistance, and it's super important to know. Okay, so let's go back to proteins. I'm going to start in the middle. We're going to start with proteins and say that when we eat those, now we're going to talk about how much they keep you full or not. So protein keeps you pretty satiated. It's the one of the three macronutrients that gets you to be the most full and stay full the longest. So it kind of sticks to your bones, that building and the energy just sticks with you longer. You have less breakthrough hunger. You have less breakthrough cravings. All of that's happening when we have protein as far as what our hunger goes. Now, fats are a little less satiating than protein, because they don't inflate your insulin, but they also stick with you longer than carbohydrates do. So fats should also always be combined with protein. A protein without the right amount of fats is really not going to metabolize or digest correctly. Your body's not going to get all of the benefit from protein without the fats attached. They work together, just like fiber and carbohydrates, because fiber is just a non digestible carbohydrate, and in natural carbohydrates is found packaged with the carbohydrates that we're talking about that raise blood sugar. So, protein and fats are going to keep you the most full. And it's not about calories. I showed yesterday a picture of a gentleman who really got rid of the carbohydrates out of his diet, started focusing on fats and protein, and he's leaner than he's ever been. And he's probably eating 2 times the calories, 1.5 to 2 times the calories he was eating when he was carb fed. So, user 566. Yes, I'll be talking about a protocol that helps with insulin resistance. I also do a lot of education. So now I'm not selling something. I am helping people understand their health and giving them an alternative to all the medications and the disease and disorders that we have today. And isn't that an amazing thing? Because most of the time when you go to the doctor, they're selling you prescriptions. They're selling you all of that stuff. When you go to the grocery store, they're selling you foods that are not necessarily healthy for you. When you go to the car dealership, you're buying a car. But we all have needs in our life. And what most of us need right now is this understanding about nutrition that's causing us to be sick. And when I say nutrition, people are like, "Oh my God, it's a diet or I have to do all this crazy stuff." So I'm here to tell you it's much simpler, but I want to give people a basis and understanding for why this simple system is working so that you can get better too. Because look, I have people who have reversed their high blood pressure, people who have reversed stage 3 kidney disease, people whose ankylosing spondylitis is in remission, people who are getting better from things like lupus, from edema and neuropathy, people who thought maybe they would never walk again because of the swelling and the pain in their legs, and they're back up walking now. That's pretty amazing, right? So let's dive back into this whole thing, metabolism, because it links into all of those things. And on a normal live, I would be talking about those. But today we're just going to talk about metabolism, and we're going to get through this. All right. So protein and fats. When I give recommendations for what we should do, it's pretty much the same as Dr. Ben Bickman, who wrote this book, Why We Get Sick. He says limit carbs, prioritize protein, and fill with fats. And I say fiber first, protein, and then fats, because for most of us, it's really hard to limit those carbohydrates. Just be honest. We're not going to go from a trash diet that is what we've known to a perfect diet overnight. And so I want people to start being able to take steps to getting their health back in a way that's manageable and sustainable for them and realistic. Realistic is the key, right? Because let's see, how many of you guys here are willing to change your entire diet today and go carnivore? Put a 1 in. Or if you think that today you could stop eating the way you are and go full on vegan and never eat the way you are again, put a 2 in. Those are pretty drastic, and that's what most nutrition is asking for, is for you to drastically change everything. But what they're failing to understand is that the foods we have today are deficient in several nutrients, and the way we want to eat with low fat and low fiber is causing a lot of our sickness to go over. Okay, so fiber, I always say first, because those of us that do have carbs, that fiber slows down the delivery of carbs into the system. And it helps you, it's not, there's a big misconception with the fiber that I use. Some people think, oh my gosh, well, it's slowing down and it's encapsulating the sugars and it's doing all this, so it's depriving me of nutrients. No, it's not. Your body needs to hold on to those nutrients for a little bit so that it can cope with metabolizing them. So we want them to slow down from eating through our stomach. We want them to hit the intestine in more of a time released action. This is part of why proteins keep you fuller longer, because proteins stay in your gut a little bit longer than carbohydrates do. There's a lot of other factors there. Yeah, it takes time, right? So, but even so, look, I have a woman who went pescatarian. So primarily vegetarian, but had some seafood and whatnot in there as well. Buys all of her stuff from the farmer's market, so it's supposed to be organically grown and whatnot. She was still having problems with insulin resistance, still had some weight that she couldn't get off, still had some inflammation and other things going on in her body that she couldn't control. Started the system and ended up losing, she wanted to lose 5 pounds, ended up losing 20 pounds just by doing the two simple tools that I'm going to show you. Um, it made that much change in her body that she actually had to up her food intake to keep from losing excess weight. But having the two simple products that I use, she was able to get rid of her inflammation and a number of other things, have her energy higher, her moods better. And so she was like, well, I don't want to stop doing this because it makes sense that it's, and she wrote a nutrition book, by the way, and she used the uses the protocol daily. But she was like, I'm feeling better because of the nutrition part. So I don't want to get rid of that. So what I need to do is add a little bit more of these proteins and fats in so that I am not losing weight and I'm staying fuller longer. So um, protein and fats will keep you satiated. Now, when I say fiber first, again, because we're slowing down the delivery of carbs, it's allowing absorption of nutrients, but it's allowing it in a way that our body can cope with it. When we have nutrients that are hitting our intestinal tract too quickly, a lot of it just goes to waste because the body can't absorb it all at once. Fiber helps us slow that whole process down when we're having carbohydrates. The problem with carbohydrates today is that most of our carbohydrates are boxed or labeled or packaged or whatever, and they're very deficient in those fibers that are helping us control the carbohydrates that we're eating. So carbohydrates, a lot of people think carbohydrates, oh yeah, bread, rice, pasta, whatever, that's carbohydrates. What you need to understand is that every fruit and vegetable is a carbohydrate. Now, okay, great. So those are natural, and that is a much better choice, right? For most of us, that is a much better. But this woman who is eating all natural foods grown by people she trusted was still having problems. So how does that happen? Our foods today, even not just the packaged and boxed ones, so we're going to step away from the grocery aisles that have all the labels on them, and we're going to look at, the farmer's market or the produce aisles, and we're going to say, okay, if somebody shops primarily there and they're still having some of these issues, what's going on? What's going on is a number of things. Our foods have been modified so that they're more palatable to us. They're more delectable to us. We want to eat them more. So if you think that food makers are only interested in selling you the food that's in the boxes and keeping you hungry to eat more, you're wrong. Part of it is because we've wanted things that are bigger, better, sweeter. So now, in order to get something that was the size of like that to the size of my fist, how do they get a peach from that size to this size? Well, they engineer it so that it contains more fructose, more glucose, but it has less fiber. The fiber keeps it dense and small and probably a little bit bitter. So if I was to hand you two peaches, one is small and nutrient dense, but it's crunchy and it's bitter and it's kind of hard to chew, or I offered you this big, sweet, plump, juicy peach that's going to drip all over your face and it's going to taste amazing, which one are you going to pick? Most people are going to pick the big, sweet, juicy peach, thinking that a peach is a peach, right? But the big juicy peach is devoid of a number of nutrients, but full of that fructose and glucose or sugar that's creating our problem. So it's good to eat raw organic foods, but it's also good to understand that there is some deficiencies in those in today's food that's causing us to be sick. Fiber and a number of other nutrients are what's missing from those raw and organic foods that we all love to, dive into. And so for some people, when we look at this, some people can eat put the same thing on two different people's plates, one and the same amount, one will stay lean and the other is going to become heavier from those foods. Yeah, Bryn. So that's amazing. But I'm going to tell you, most people in here, and I applaud you. Actually, I really applaud you. But most people in here cannot adopt that lifestyle today or are willing to or any of that. So that's great. If you can do that, amazing. I do the best I can, but I'm going to be honest. I have autism, I have ADHD, I have impulse control. And so, as much as I think I'm going to do all the right things and I'm going to follow this path, I know that I'm human and I'm flawed and I'm not going to always do things perfect. And add that with what I talked about in the beginning of my talk this morning was two other drivers of insulin resistance that I really can't control that set my body up to be in a malnourished state or insulin fed state are stress and inflammation. So things like the colds can cause inflammation in your body. So probably with the one that we just went through, the major cold that we just were fighting a couple of years ago that shut us all down, one of the reasons that it was so hard for many people was this malnourished state that we're in. The body can't fight off even simple colds when it's malnourished and full of inflammation. Remember, inflammation causes insulin resistance. Insulin resistance causes inflammation. So, um, I love fresh fish. But guess what, you guys? We're gonna go off topic for a second. Through a few symptoms that I've had, just and looking at my body and skin, nails, all that stuff. I noticed that I had a nail that's curving under. I have a really flat spot on another nail. So I started going in and trying to figure out what's going on. And yeah, so there's a little bit of a nutrient deficiency in me still that I'm going to be taking care of by a product that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. But it's interesting to know that even though I primarily eat good things, one of the best sources of iron that I'm going to be talking about that I'm deficient in is just red meat. And yet, how many of you have been told, especially with the new food thing that came out, that red meat is bad for you? Red meat's horrible. And there are people who are going to tell you, you have to be vegan to take care of your insulin resistance. You can't have red meat. It's the worst thing for your insulin resistance ever. Well, what if this guy, who's one of the top metabolic scientists in the world, who wrote this book, Why We Get Sick, this guy has done studies. In fact, I was just listening to him talk, and it's interesting because he says his whole life is about metabolism and fat cells. He actually has fat cells in petri dishes sitting across from his office that they're looking at. They're looking at every angle of fat cells, how they grow, why they grow, what's going on within the fat cell, what caused it to grow, what inflammation is going on in there, all of that. And that's all he studies. And yet he says that red meat is actually one of the best things for you for insulin resistance. Now, it's also interesting to me that deficiencies in iron, when we're starting to try and cut out all the red meat and stuff, because it's been called the devil, right? Well, why is it called the devil from the food industry? It's harder to grow, takes longer to grow. When you eat it, you're satiated and you don't want to eat as much. So now they're selling you less food. Better to sell you the carbohydrates that you're going to eat more and more of. So Brian says he eats a pound of liver once a week, fresh from the butcher shop down the street. That's freaking amazing, Brian. I think you're doing amazing things, and you are because your body probably feels really amazing. Yeah, and grass-fed beef is giving you your life back. I was resistant to grass-fed beef for a while. I have a hair tickling my face, just because I'm like, what's all the hype? But I started buying more organic chicken and grass-fed beef, and the beef just tastes different, doesn't it? The beef that's not grass-fed and it's not is a little tougher and it's a little drier and it's less palatable. That grass-fed beef, thanks, Cassie. This will be on YouTube if you want to come back and finish listening to what we're going to talk about. It'll be on YouTube later today. When this is done, it'll be there. So the grass-fed beef, I actually bought, my son deployed, and I love my son. Anybody who knows me knows I love my family. It's like the big thing in my life. And I actually took my health back because, not just for me, but because I knew the implications and the stress that it was causing my family. Yep. Lambo, if we can afford that, I absolutely agree with that. In my fridge right now is some there are some grass-fed steaks and there's some grass-fed beef, but I also have a lot of chicken. I love chicken, but I also have to understand that, hey, I have an iron deficiency, and so maybe I need to up my intake of red meat. Now, my daughter-in-law, I love her so much, and she's done so much work, but she'll, oh, just eat spinach. Okay, slow your roll, people. Spinach is great for iron, but what most people don't understand is that if you don't cook spinach, you're not metabolizing the iron that's in the spinach. You need to cook the spinach, then you're getting those doses of iron and other nutrients that you need from it. And so we're going to dive into plants in just a little bit. Stay true to you. So stay true to you as I talk. Would you mind, if you're up for it, what have you tried for your insulin resistance and anemia? Anemia also mimics what's going, a lot of these things mimic or have similar symptoms of insulin resistance, right? So fatigue and headaches and body aches and pains and uh, brain fog, that all happens with anemia as well as insulin resistance. I'm really not here to talk about iron this morning, but I think it's important that we understand some of these things. So, if you're anemic, find a good source of iron. Whole foods are better, right? If you have to supplement, find one that's really um, bioavailable, and that's going to take some research. Your best thing to do is to just eat that red meat. Grass fed is better, and cook your spinach and eat that cooked spinach. Now, like, I regularly throw avocado and spinach in my protein shakes, but I understand also that without cooking that spinach first, which is going to give a more pungent taste to my protein shakes, I'm just not getting the iron absorption. Maybe I need to change that. Um, but there's that. So let's get back to the macronutrients. I went way, way off track. A stream took me someplace I wasn't ready to go. Okay, so it talks a little bit about fiber, protein, and fats. So that's how the 6 simple steps that I talked about are fiber first. Fiber is just slowing down those carbohydrates, allowing you to stay satiated. It's not just, there's so many other things, but it's allowing you to stay satiated from those carbohydrates longer. It's allowing those carbohydrates to deliver slower without depriving you of nutrients, actually helping up the intake of your nutrients, as well as helping your gut be healthier, because fiber is actually prebiotics. It's what feeds those probiotics. You get fiber into your gut, and those probiotics in your gut start eating up that fiber, and they create these short chain fatty acids. And when you have that fiber in there and those fatty acids go up, it helps you keep your insulin low, and it helps you start switching into fat burning. Now, we haven't even talked about that yet, so let's talk about that. The 2 sources of fuel for your body, because we know that fats is a fuel, we know that carbohydrates is a fuel, we know that protein is a building block. So the 2 sources of fuel for your body are really carbohydrates and fats. When we have carbohydrates, though, it spikes our insulin, and this is important. When we have fats, it doesn't spike our insulin. Why is that important? Because insulin blocks the breakdown of fat. Our bodies are pretty smart, and when we give it fuel and we have insulin high, our body says, hey, we got to utilize this fuel, so we're not going to burn fat. We actually want to build things. And if we have too much fuel coming in, then we're just going to add more fat so that we can survive later. But with insulin high, Bryn, hide the liver in the hamburger when you make one. That's a good idea. I haven't thought of that. And I probably need to start taking in more liver myself. Although it's not my favorite food, if you have some ideas on how to cook liver, I would love to hear them. Message me, because I really need to get that iron intake up in my body. By the way, I'm looking at iron supplements because I know that my diet is imperfect and my life is imperfect and that I don't like eating liver. But I am looking at a bovine source of iron because it's probably the source that our body, bovine being cow, but the source that our body recognizes and utilizes the easiest. So there's a lot to do here with all of that. So yeah, liver has a ton of vitamins. So I really have to dive into eating it, right? Okay, back to this other stuff. So fiber first, protein, prioritize protein. If you do this with your plate, I have a fiber that's 7 different sources of soluble and insoluble fiber. That's really, it's scientifically based, and I have this before I eat, every time I eat, 10 minutes before. Swells up in my gut, helps me feel full, helps with the delivery of any of the carbohydrates that I do eat. But the next thing I do is I prioritize protein. And this is how I overcame my high blood pressure, lost 50 pounds, got a good portion of my eyesight reversed, stopped my bleeding teeth and gums, stopped my joint loss, stopped my muscle cramps, stopped having skin tags and dark skin patches, all of the stuff. This is all I did. Fiber first, prioritize protein, and then fill up with fats. So now we're going to get into this whole calories in, calories out thing. It's flawed, and so many more doctors and especially metabolic specialists are talking about how flawed that ideology is. You can focus on calories and get primarily carbohydrates in your diet, but you're going to eat a lot less food. You're having carbohydrates as your source. You're going to stay hungrier longer. You're going to spike your insulin, and you're going to actually train your body to hold on to more fat. When you can get the insulin levels down, prioritizing protein and fats, you're going to naturally start getting into a fat burning mode much easier because insulin levels are already low. And so with just a smaller amount of time of not eating, you're getting that insulin levels down so that other hormones can come out and you now get into a fat burning state. Husband's fasting numbers go up when he actually tries cutting down sugar and carbs. So tell me what fasting numbers are going up. If it's the blood sugar numbers that are going up when he fasts, let's talk about that a little bit, okay? When you fast, it's important to understand, like I said, our body's either using sugar or it's using fat for fuel. Now, our fat in our body actually is holding on to a number of things, but some sugars are one of them. There's a couple of things that happen. When you're insulin resistant and your body's really used to burning sugar for fuel, now you take that away, your body initially says, oh, hold on. We don't know how to function like this. Yes, we're burning fat, but we need to pull out excess sugar because we're used to high amounts of sugar for our body to run on. Your blood sugar goes up. But here's the interesting thing. When it's not sugar that we're taking into our body, but sugar that's being released from our body has a different pathway to use that glucose or blood sugar. So it can get that into the cells for energy easier without rising insulin again. So dietary sugar, bringing the sugar in through the pathway of the mouth is going to insulin. When you're fasting and you're getting into a fat burning state, you're actually, besides the fat cells, your liver takes excess glucose and it starts packaging it together and binding all these little glucose molecules together. And that's called glycogen. And it holds that glycogen inside the liver to be broken down and used as energy later. So if he's fasting and he's really insulin resistant, meaning his body perceives that it needs a lot of sugar, he's probably breaking down some of these stores. Good thing. And his sugars are going up. Now, I did a 10-day fast last year, about May last year. Ouch, I just ran over my own toe. But I did a glucose monitor and I watched my blood sugar levels. So my blood sugar levels in a completely fasted state, drinking only the tea and water, my blood sugar levels would drop down to about 60. And then it was just this like nice curve instead of spike, dip, flatline, whatever. My blood sugar levels were just a really nice rhythmic pattern going down to about the level of 60 and then going up to about 120 and then dropping back down. So what's happening there is as your blood sugar levels drop and you're not bringing more sugar in, the body's going to find ways to get glucose back in because it's energy. It's really just energy in so that the cells can use the glucose. But the great thing with fasting is now the cells are open to using the glucose. In an overfed state, the cells are like, I have too much already, don't need you today, go away. And so it stores it as fat. But blood sugars can go up when you're extremely insulin resistant because your body's trained to live on sugars and it's not yet learned to switch over to fat burning mode efficiently. Efficiently. But even if your body's efficient in burning fat and you were wearing a glucose monitor and you did a 10-day fast like I did, you're going to see some difference in your glucose in your bloodstream because the body knows it needs energy and it's going to pull that energy from wherever it can and it ends up back in the bloodstream as it's carried around to the cells of the body. I don't know if that made sense. I hope it did, but a lot of people will notice in the first month or two that they may have an elevated sugar level, and that's part of the reason why. Now, also, when you do your morning sugar levels, cortisol plays a big part in that. So, for some people, we're going to talk about two things with the morning blood sugars. There's cortisol plays a huge role for all of us. We have this dawn phenomenon thing going on where our cortisol spikes up, says, hey, it's time to get up. You got to go to work. You got stuff to do today. Wake up. So when the body perceives that it's time to wake up, cortisol goes up. Why cortisol? Because cortisol starts getting your heart to beat a little faster. It's now not in this resting state where you're sleeping. It's like, hey, my heart's racing just a little bit. Time to get up. Hey, we need energy in the system, so it's pulling more sugar into your system so you have the energy to get up and move around. So that early morning blood sugar that's spiking for some people it's just a factor of how their body works. Some people it's a factor of being extremely insulin resistant and the body pulling too much of that out, but that can happen. Okay, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. You just need to know that if you're having that little bit higher blood sugar when you wake up, you're probably stressed, right? Your cortisol levels are maybe a little too high and you're getting more sugar pulled into your system because those cortisol levels are wanting you to get up and go too much. Okay. So that's I wasn't planning to talk about that this morning, but we're there. So we're going to talk about that. Now, as we wrap up today, we talked a little bit about macronutrients. I do a lot of anecdotal stuff, information from my own family, right? So I am talking about a protocol that uses this tea that I'm drinking now and 2 fiber matrices that I have before I eat anything. And of course, it changed my life. I was on a walker, a cane. I had high blood pressure. We thought I wasn't going to live to be 70. I was really falling apart in life, and doctors weren't helping, medications weren't helping. I had pretty much given up. And then one day I saw this online and I'm like, I got to try it. I don't know what else to do. I'm going to try it and see if it works. And it has a 90-day money back guarantee. So if it doesn't work, it is what it is. I get my money back. And so I'll just give it 90 days. I did that and my whole life changed. Brian. Yeah. So, Brian, the more you become insulin sensitive, the more that dawn phenomenon starts to go away, right? But the fiber and the drink that I have every day, my family uses it. So I have she's now 13. She started it when she was 11. She was pre-diabetic. I was staying with her and her mom, trying to help out with a situation with a single mom. And I started noticing she was eating fruits for every meal. She didn't focus on protein at all, no matter what I said to her. She just was like, no, fruits are the healthy thing. And they drank a lot of juice and they had all that. But I also noticed that she was starting to have dark patches on her elbows, on her knees. She was a little chunky. She was a little moody. She was having some problems. And I said, I think she's either pre-diabetic or diabetic, mom. We need to get her blood sugar tested. And sure enough, she was pre-diabetic. Now, the flawed part of that is that we're looking at blood sugars, and the blood sugars aren't going to spike until you're pre-diabetic, but the insulin could be spiked, could have been spiked her whole life. But the food that we're eating now caused this 11-year-old pre-diabetic type 2 at 11 years old, and she was primarily eating fruits, vegetables, and fruit juice. She started the protocol that I'm doing. She's no longer pre-diabetic, lost weight, doing better in school, has better mental clarity, just has a much better mood. She was always like my moody emo granddaughter. She still is a little bit, but her moods are much brighter now because she got the insulin resistance under control. And if a 11-year-old can do this, anybody can. So there's that. My 14-year-old grandson uses it. He has ADHD. It helps him with his mood, his mental clarity, and his focus by getting his insulin levels under control. My daughter uses it. Her issues are prediabetes, high blood pressure, acne, a number of the same things that I suffer with. By the way, acne is a huge indicator that you're having some insulin resistance going on. I've done talks about skin, and I can do them another day. But so my daughter, that whole family outside of my 6-year-old granddaughter uses it, but the 6-year-old granddaughter still drinks the tea and loves it. But it's taken a few years for me to get my son and his wife to allow me to let my grandson, who has a liposomal disorder, a genetic, actually in his DNA disorder that prevents him from utilizing fats properly. So that causes a lot of issues. The medication that he's on is about $30,000 a month, and $30,000 a month to save his life. But those medications also are giving him diarrhea and a few things. And so he's a little bit, even though he eats well and they focus on giving him nutrients, a little bit malnourished. And he ends up with some gastrointestinal issues that we don't want him to go into. He's in 2nd grade now. We don't want him to go into 3rd, 4th, 5th grade with these issues that could, impact his social life as he gets older. I finally said, Mom, this will help him with that fat digestion. This will help him with his intestinal tract and some of the damage that the medications that are saving his life are doing to his body. And so 10 days or so ago, we started him on a smaller amount of this protocol. And already his gastrointestinal, his bowel movements are much better, less of those other issues. It doesn't taste bad, but he's very resistant to tasting new things. If I show him something new he hasn't tasted, his immediate thing, what he knows what it tastes like or not, is like to scowl up his face. But he drinks it because he's a trooper, and he's told me he feels better. He's like, Nana, my tummy doesn't hurt as much. Nana, I just feel better. Thank you for helping me start this. And so now even he's doing the fiber every morning, because it's not just about, like somebody said earlier in the day, selling a product. It's really about saving lives. So if I have so many stories from people across the spectrum with disorders, and all they had to do was a tea in the morning and a pre-meal drink before they eat, and their health got better, why wouldn't I talk about that and help more and more people understand that? So it works like I didn't get through all the metabolic stuff I wanted to today. Brian, thank you for all your input. But look, this tea that I'm drinking this morning, have you guys, everybody heard about like Mounjaro, Ozempic, semaglutide, Trulicity, Tirzepatide, all of those? Has everybody, put a 1 in the chat if you've heard those things. And I have chat going on over here that I didn't even pay attention to. Sorry, Melba. And then I get people who are talking about some herbal doctor. And look, before I go on, we'll talk about that in a minute. Those medications that I just listed, they're called GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide 1 agonist. So they're making that glucagon-like peptide work better in the body. The glucagon-like peptide can help you feel more satiated, help you with utilizing fuel, and help you with burning fat, helping keep blood sugars down. Now, this tea, this particular tea. What it is just it's yerba mate tea grown in Argentina. The difference with this and the bagged yerba mate teas or the canned yerba mate teas or whatever you are looking at getting is it's about 375 times more potent than any of those. We hand pick it at the right time of ripeness for the efficacy we need. We fire roast it to get those nutrients out of it. We then extract it, concentrate it, and then we purify it. So now we have a highly concentrated, highly pure form of yerba mate tea. Now, what that does with this tea, not the bagged teas, not the canned teas, there's scientific studies that show this tea increases that glucagon-like peptide action in your body by 70% by nourishing your body, not by forcing any action or causing damage. Those glucagon-like peptide um, medications, it's safe for some people, but for many people, it can cause problems with gallbladder. It can cause problems with the pancreas because now it's overloading the pancreas. It can cause problems with the thyroid and gastroparesis, where your gastrointestinal tract slows down because of some of the other actions of those peptides that are exogenous. When we use this, we're encouraging our body to up that increase of glucagon-like peptide without all the damaging side effects. And it does it by 70%. So do I want to pay 300 to 1500 bucks a month for Monjaro and whatnot and know that I could be damaging my body? Or do I want to spend $5 a day on something that's giving my body nutrients extremely high in vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, anti-cancer properties, anti-inflammatory properties? I want to do that. Holy basil tea. I'm not as familiar with that one, Brian. I'll have to look it up. But I know that this tea is great. It was actually developed as a mental health tool. So not only does it help you feeling satiated, it helps you up your production of ketones in a fasted state. Ketones are telling you to burn fat for fuel, but it's giving you mental clarity. It's giving you energy without crashes. It does a whole lot for this fasting lifestyle and your metabolism. So I'm in a fasted state today. I had dinner about 6 o'clock last night, which is pretty typical for me. So I'm already 15 and a half hours fasted. When I do eat, probably in an hour or so, I'm just going to put the fiber in my body first. Why? Knowing that our food is imperfect, the fiber also has vitamins, minerals, plants, but it gives me 7 different sources of fiber that start to expand in my gut, help me feel fuller before I even eat, and help slow down the delivery of those sugars and fats into my system. It has scientific studies that say that it reduces a blood glucose spike by 20% with just this one packet. 20% is pretty huge in what it's doing inside of our body as far as a glucose spike. So my 3 grandkids, my 2 daughters, other family members are all doing this to manage our diabetes, to manage our health. I have a family member who's type 1 diabetic who does this as well because it helps control his need for insulin. When we're keeping the blood sugar levels down, even he who can't produce insulin is able to lower the dose of insulin he has to take as a type 1 because we're controlling his glucose spikes. So all this really does come down to glucose metabolism. What the system does is help with that. And through the pathways, if you want to know how all of that links to all of the things that are listed above, just follow along. I'm here every morning at about 8:30 and Monday through Friday. And we talk about things. Yesterday, we talked a little bit more in depth about the functions of thyroid and how it relates to insulin resistance and why some people, even when they're getting their insulin resistance under control, may still have problems with weight. Because weight, before I go today, I want everybody to know weight is all about hormones and not so much about calories. Oh, no, Raymond, I didn't see your comment, hon. I didn't even see it. OCD, OCD, I would treat it. I'm not a doctor. And I don't know if your comment even came through. Raymond, I didn't see a message from you. Okay, so I just didn't see a message. That's probably why I didn't respond. If it was up there further and I just missed it. Not that I'm ignoring you. Okay, so the system is just this: a tea in the morning, a pre-meal drink before I eat anything. You can get it in my profile link. Please save yourself the trouble. If you go to Amazon, eBay, Walmart, you don't get any of the guarantees, the 90-day money back guarantee, the quality guarantee, the low price guarantee. Everyone that has called me and said, hey, I bought it, but I haven't heard from you. Well, they bought it on Amazon. I wouldn't know they bought it. The coding that I give is when you use through my link. Okay. You're buying directly from the company. So just use the link in my profile. I can drop it in on Facebook, but it's just a tea in the morning, a pre-meal drink before I eat anything, and it reversed diabetes type 2. It got my blood pressure from 150 over 110 daily. The best we could get it to in the doctor's office was 150 over 110, but I have a blood pressure cuff and I know how to use it. I have several, and even that, my blood pressure would get as high as 180 over 150. Devastating blood pressure. My blood pressure now is normally 110 over 70. No medications. I'm off of 13 different medications, and my health is better than it ever was. I actually feel better than I did in my late 40s. And that's because I'm getting nutrients to my body. There's so much more I wanted to go over with protein, and let's go back to that really quick. One thing I want to drop, and we can talk about more in depth on another live, is protein. The source matters. Brian says he's doing red meats, he's doing liver. Amazing. Some of the best sources of protein we can get are those sources. Wild caught salmon 2 to 3 times a week, or at least once a week. That's amazing as well. Now, when we look at proteins, as far as the manufactured proteins, we have to understand that, and I utilize protein shakes to get the nutrients in because of my lifestyle. But I also understand that that protein needs to be paired with fat. So I'm adding some heavy whipping cream, some coconut milk, or some avocado to my protein shakes to make sure that the protein is packaged with fat. The protein doesn't get metabolized and used as building blocks like it's supposed to if it doesn't have fat attached. So now we're going to talk about powdered proteins super briefly, okay? Because there's a lot to go on with that. But when we look at whey proteins, which are animal-derived proteins, our body can metabolize those much easier. We're built for that. When we look at things like pea protein, look, the animals that eat that for protein have different guts than we have. We have one gut, and it acts very much differently. I can't remember how many guts like a cow and some animals have that are primarily grass-fed, right? So one of the reasons that beef protein is so good for us is like that cow took the nutrients from all the vegetables and broke it down and put it into a protein that we can use because we can't metabolize it that way. Now, when we look at pea proteins, it takes about 1,000 peas to give you one serving of protein. And then when we do that, it's not paired with fat and our body's not really metabolizing it. And the proteins from plants, our body just doesn't break down the same way as it does the proteins from meat. Plus, and I was listening to Dr. Bickman talk about this, there are components in plants that he calls anti-nutrients. So even though you're getting in protein from these plants, there's an anti-nutrient in even those peas that prohibits our body from utilizing that protein at its best. So everybody who loves plant-based proteins, you do what you do, you boo. But with the knowledge that I have from the specialist of metabolism, and he's talking about that those when we're primarily eating vegetables and plant proteins and plant nutrients, there's a component of those, and this highly controversial, and I haven't dove into his work because I just don't know if I agree with him too much either, but Dr. Gundry talks about some of those things. But there are components in plants that can cause inflammation and that can cause us to not absorb nutrients in the way that we're supposed to or we need to. And so that gives me basis more for, I'm type O positive. So I just metabolize proteins better. But it gives more credence to me just focusing on proteins. And to be real, most of my diet is protein. I don't eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. I do have them. I love blueberries. I love strawberries. I like avocado. I like green beans. I like, but I just don't have a wide variety of fruits and vegetables in my diet, primarily proteins, and I'm learning to add fats in. So, which is opposite of what I grew up with. Most of you my age grew up with this thing that fats were really bad for you. Now we're going to talk about fats really quick as well. Fats, the dietary fats are not causing the cholesterol in your bloodstream. Sugar's causing that. Also, understand that although glucose is a major source of energy for your brain, cholesterol contributes to your brain's function. So people who are trying to get their cholesterol levels as low as possible, that might be flawed because that cholesterol helps with infections, inflammation, and keeping your brain from turning into Alzheimer's brain. Okay. We need cholesterol in our system. We need healthy amounts of cholesterol in our system. It's not about getting the cholesterol down and gone. It's about understanding how the cholesterol works. Fats are not harming you, but it depends on the fats, because I promised to talk about that. So the fats that Dr. Bickman talks about are the fruit fats like avocado, olive oil, and coconut oil. If you can squeeze it and get fat out of it, oily substance out of it, that's probably a good source of fat for you. Corn is not a great source of fat. Why are we adding fat to our corn if corn, a grain, was a great source of fat? It's not. And so, but yet people are eating corn oil. And that's a whole other topic, but that's Rockefeller developed that as basically a machine oil and realized it was food, so we could market it as a food product. And now we ingest it, something that's highly drenched in hexane, a chemical solvent. But those seed oils, we're going to talk about seed oils a little bit, are high in something called linoleic acids. Those high amounts of linoleic acids can actually exacerbate insulin resistance. So what people have been taught and sold is healthy. There may be some small health benefits to it, but the increase of the linoleic acid is actually increasing your insulin resistance, encouraging your body. Those linoleic acids encourage your body to store fat for fuel. Even though they're a fat, they're acting in a very broad sense, acting more like sugar in your body. So fats, yes. Seed oils, no. Okay. That's going to be devastating for some people to hear, but go do some real research on it. You'll see. I can do a talk on that later if necessary. Avocado, olive, coconut oil. I use beef, and yes, like Kerrygold. I learned about that when I was doing bulletproof coffee years ago, but I use a good form of butter. I don't have margarine or any of those oils. Butter, coconut oil, and olive oil are all that's in my house. And it matters. Those things help you be more insulin sensitive, where the seed oils are causing more insulin resistance. So even though I want to eat more fat, there's a reason I'm using whole cream, cow derived, right? Or better yet, avocado, or a little bit of coconut milk, so I don't have all the lactose and stuff from the whole cream. I add that to my protein so that my protein metabolizes and actually builds the blocks that it needs to. Without fats, those proteins just are not going to go to the building blocks, or there's a membrane around um, your muscle cells. And I'm not talking about just the skeletal muscle. I'm talking about all the muscle in your body, heart, liver, lungs, all of those are muscle. There's a membrane around those, that little thin white membrane that's built up of fat. And so when we start to take fat out of our body, or give our body fats that it can't really metabolize correctly, that membrane around the muscle cells becomes thin, weak, brittle, and now we have muscular problems, and it's not good. So always pair protein with fats. But I'm off topic and I'm rambling. So the other three things that I talk about with how I manage insulin resistance is limit your carbs. We already talked about getting rid of bagged, boxed, labeled carbs as much as possible and leaning into the natural carbs. So yes, I have spinach in my fridge. Yes, I like tomatoes, even though they're inflammatory. I love the taste of tomatoes, so I use them every once in a while. I'm just careful with them. but I do get in those kind of carbohydrates and try to limit the carbohydrates that come from a package. I know when I start eating too much carbohydrates from a package, my weight automatically starts going up and I start having inflammation and swelling and everything in my body. Pretty big clue. So, fiber first, prioritize protein, fill up with fats, limit your carbs, and then these next two are lifestyle. Do some intermittent fasting. There's been a lot of work around intermittent fasting. I was listening to Dr. Hyman talk the other night, though, and he said, and a number of doctors are changing their view on intermittent fasting a little bit. And I've got to dive into more about what they say about it. But what I do know is Dr. Hyman, and it's amazing to me when doctors agree with my train of thought because it means I'm on track, right? Or for me, it means that. With the system that I do, when I talk about intermittent fasting, one of the flaws that I've seen people do is they think a little bit of intermittent fasting is good, a lot is better. So they increase their fasting time, decrease their eating window time, and now they've decreased so much that they're trying to eat in one big meal a day. The body has a hard time digesting that, and you're just not able to get the nutrients in a day with one meal. So doing the 16-8 still allows us to have two good meals, a better opportunity to get nutrients in while allowing some of the benefits of fasting to happen. I caution people, and that OMAD part is really driven because there is some efficacy for what happens in our body in fasting between 16 and 24 hours, but there's also this big driver of calories in, calories out, and they're like, well, if I drop to one meal a day, I'm restricting my calories and I'm getting this benefit. But the body goes into defense mode when we start doing that, and a number of people who've switched to OMAD say, well, I'm only eating one meal a day, but I can't lose weight. No, because your body is in crisis mode and it's holding on to the weight. A little bit of fasting is great. Allow your body to do what it needs to do, but don't go over the edge. Now, I do some extended fasting, like 36 and 12. I've been doing that. I did the other day, I did 36 and I did almost a 48-hour fast. But that's because I want to get my liver and some inflammation down, constant stresses in life. But when I eat, then when I come out of that extended fast, I focus on nutrients. And oftentimes, when I'm doing this 36 and 12, I have 3 meals on the day that I eat. And I am really packing in protein and fiber and fats as my primary source of nutrients so that my body has the right kind of nutrients to build and get healthy from, and not just filling it back up with carbohydrates. So fasting, there's a lot of efficacy to it, but there is a little bit of finesse to it. Okay, so don't fall into the trap that if intermittent fasting of 16-8 is good, OMAD is better, because science is now showing that OMAD is actually not great for people. The caveat would be that older people, 70 and older, who have a lower level of energy expenditure in their life and lower need for that, may be able to get away with OMAD. But if you're doing OMAD, you probably have some bigger supplementation needs to get the nutrients in your body that you need. So let's just deal with that. But intermittent fasting allows your body to switch from sugar burning to fat burning. I talk about it on other lives. I'll be happy to talk about it tomorrow. But know that intermittent fasting, besides all the autophagy and the fat burning, it really is just switching between sugar for fuel and fat for fuel. And that's why it's so great. Our bodies were built for that. Our bodies were built to take all that excess carb and store it as fat so that we could survive the lean times. We're built to live in this way. We're built to have those times where we don't have food. And then when we do have food, we can utilize that energy. We're just built for it. Understand that. The last thing is exercise. So you got to move your body. We live in a society that we sit way too much, including me. And so I have little workout programs. And even though, like, my grandson's here and we're going to go play Fortnite and I'm going to spend some time with him because it's his spring break, I made a deal with them. They're between games. We have to do some type of exercise while the next game is loading, whether it's standing up and doing some air squats or couch squats, or for him, wall push-ups or something. We've got to get up and move our body between games. Moving our body getting these muscles to work actually helps us become more insulin sensitive. They're going to take in the energy, and muscles have a back door to get glucose in. So even in a fasted state, your muscles get fed and they're not depleting until you're in extreme, like probably past 72 hours or more of fasting. Your muscles really are not at risk if you have fat on your body. They have a way to break down the fat, get the glucose into the system. Okay, so I'm going to hop off. I'm going to go spend time with that boy. I promised him an hour, and it's been an hour and a half. Now, I do want to hop off saying I'm really here to talk about this system that changed my life, that's changed my entire family's life, and has saved multiple lives. And I hear people say this. This is why I say it, because people will stand up and say, this system saved my life. I feel like it saved my life too. I have a better prognosis. I can now look forward to living to be 100. Crazy. I want to live to be 100. But 3 years ago, I didn't know if I was going to live to be 65, much less 70. I don't have pain when I go up and down stairs. My daughter-in-law and I were talking about it. TikTok verifying that I'm a real person. But she remembers when I couldn't go up and down stairs, when I had a walker and a cane, and I used a grocery cart to go through the grocery store because it was a walker without showing everybody I was using a walker. I don't have any of that now. I go up and down stairs carrying groceries. I can run upstairs, things I couldn't do 3 years ago. And you guys, I have a real life. I have a real diet. I'm not like Brian, I applaud you, but I'm not doing anything crazy. I just do the things I talked about: fiber first, prioritize protein, fill up with fats, limit my carbs, intermittent fast, and try to move my body. And my diabetes has been reversed. My blood pressure has been reversed to normal, along with so many other symptoms. And all it took was doing a tea in the morning and a pre-meal drink before I eat anything. Again, get it in my profile in the link right under the red lights. If you have questions, that link under the red lights also tells you how to get a hold of me in person. If you have questions and you want to know more, you can get a hold of me. I'm never a stressful, pressful person. So just let me know. I have people who will never do the product who have asked me questions, and I answer. I'm a human being and I care about everyone that is trying to get healthy. So if this is the route that could look like it's good for you, and I think that 93% of us need it because 93% of us have a metabolic disorder, try the system. And otherwise, I'm going to see you guys tomorrow. Not quite sure what I want to talk about tomorrow. I did have somebody message me and want me to talk about Hashimoto's. But we're going to talk about Hashimoto's next week because I need to put together what I'm going to talk about and really give some links, because Hashimoto's is tough. Even endocrinologists cannot agree on how to treat Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. And I want to link that to insulin resistance and why I have so many women who have Hashimoto's whose thyroid levels are normalized now, who've lost weight, who've gotten rid of their symptoms just by doing the same protocol. So we'll talk about something tomorrow, and I'm not sure what it is. Maybe we'll talk about fats. Does anybody want to talk about fats? And or what do you want to talk about tomorrow? Condi, I great, but that's why I'm going to talk about insulin resistance. Do you know that most autoimmune doctors are talking about the fact that autoimmune, and I've heard multiple doctors dealing with endocrine and autoimmunity that say that all autoimmune disease starts with inflammation. So I've already mentioned that, injuries, surgeries, stress can cause inflammation in your body. But insulin also causes a tremendous amount of inflammation in your body. And it's likely why so many people who have these autoimmune type disorders that have addressed their insulin resistance, and many of them using the same protocol, now have relief from their autoimmune diseases by just addressing insulin resistance and likely downstream addressing the inflammation that's causing the insulin resistance as well. So Hashimoto's does have to do with the thyroid, and I will get into depth with it next week, but there is a factor where that inflammation in your gut microbiome being off, which This protocol, one of the reasons I love this is because it's helping build a healthier gut microbiome. But all of that in your intestinal tract that's inflammatory causes missed signals in the body. With Hashimoto's, one of the things is the body is perceiving the thyroid as being maybe overactive, and so it starts attacking it. And now it starts to look underactive, and we have problems. If we take the inflammatory response away, so the body's not attacking its own thyroid, we can get relief. That's a very broad overview of it. But I agree, inflammation is huge with autoimmune disease, and it's actually, according to most doctors, the basis of autoimmune disorders. So if we can reduce that inflammation naturally by putting in nutrients and reducing insulin resistance, wouldn't that be an amazing way to start potentially addressing your autoimmunity? That's why we're going to take a day to talk about Hashimoto's, because there's a lot to cover in that. And we'll do that sometime next week. Somebody did say fats, and thank you for that. So we'll talk about fats and their action because they're very important. They're not dietary fats. The right dietary fats are actually building your health, helping your metabolism, and not shutting it down. The wrong fats will shut down your metabolism and increase inflammation. And it's important to know. So we'll talk about fats tomorrow. I'm going to go spend time with this boy who's been waiting for me for an hour and a half now. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Thanks for your questions and your comments. Those of you I missed your comments, I'm sorry. I actually just don't see them all as things scroll through, and I try to address them. But and the one who said I'm not addressed questions, I scrolled back through and didn't see anything from you. So I don't know what happened there. Didn't show up on my end, not ignoring you. Guys, have a blessed day. I'll be back in the morning. We'll talk about the importance of fats and why seed oils are causing your insulin resistance, and how these other things like avocado, coconut, olive oil are actually helping your metabolism and helping your brain. There's a lot of misconceptions about cholesterol and fats, so we'll do that. I'll kind of combine cholesterol and fats, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. I want to make a note so I will remember, because you guys, I get so busy. Sometimes I'm like, what was it I said I would talk about? Okay. I appreciate you all. We'll see you in the morning. If you want to change your life and you want to get it under control, like I did, just use the system. You'll see people from time to time who hop in and they're like, I did it. We had Kim in yesterday who was talking about her lupus getting better, her diabetes being reversed, her blood pressure normalizing because she had high and low blood pressure. It's amazing, and it's easy, and it's healthful. 13 medications I'm gone with, and this is all I do, and I love it. And so do the people who are doing it. Let me know. But I think that you should try it for 90 days. And so just go to the link and get it. And then we'll talk more about fats tomorrow. Have a great day, guys. I don't know what happened, but TikTok's not letting me shut it down. So